Well, the first thing that comes to mind is this phrase that I've heard Black women say, and I'm sure
Mm,
you have, which is, I don't want you. No, I don't
mm,
need you. I want
mm.
you,
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that that is not true.
Mm,
I think that that is probably one of the worst things you can say to a man.
mm,
I
mm.
don't know. But I just think that I mean, I understand where that comes from and why
Yeah.
a woman would feel like she could, it's acceptable, I guess, to
Right.
say that because it implies that she's whole and she doesn't need a man. She wants a man.
Right.
So a man is
Hmm.
optional.
Right.
But I think it also undermines the fact that when a woman, well, when a little girl doesn't grow up, for example, with a father, when I'm an example of a woman who didn't have a lot of men to look up to
Mm,
my entire life.
hmm.
My dad
Hmm.
passed when I was young.
Mm.
So that statement is false to me because I actually think we do need men.
Yeah.
Now we can survive without
Right.
men. The
Right.
problem is that we are going to be in a deficit.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
essentially saying that you don't need a man, you want a man
Hmm.
is saying like, I mean, it's almost like the way I compare it is like I don't need like a dessert or I don't
Hmm.
need
Hmm.
popcorn, I don't need a snack, but I do
Right.
need protein.
Right.
I do
Right.
need nutrients and
Right.
vitamins.
Hmm.
So if you look at it that way, there are things that you need, and what
Right.
men bring, those are necessary. And
Right.
I am an example. My former self, most of my life,
Hmm.
and a lot of the challenges I had, is an example of what girls go through and what women go through when they don't have a man in their life.
Mm.
They suffer
Yeah.
oftentimes quite a bit, and a lot of this suffering is in silence.
Yeah.
They don't they don't they may not look like they're suffering, but they are because there's a lot of things that they don't know because no one told them because of their mom can only do so much.
Right.
So that would be the thing is this idea that men are only wanted, you don't really need them.
Hmm. And
That
you know,
I
and to touch on something that you just said, I used to say that too. When I was younger, I used to say, I don't, I want someone, I want a woman, but I don't need them. But what I had to remind myself, I think everybody needs companionship. I think everybody needs, somebody to help them. We talked about it the other day off camera. Somebody to take them to, the hospital, the doctor, or, it feels good to come home to somebody who is, able to support you in a certain way, or to just hear your day, because I think after a while, for both sexes, after a while, you both kind of like, after the parents go on or they're living their lives, now it's time for you to be adults and you have to do that with somebody. And I think for some reason we're kind of staying stagnant. We want to be young forever. We never want to, like, we keep talking about leveling up, but we don't want to go to that next phase in our lives. And I feel like sometimes with me even saying that, and then like changing that narrative and saying I need somebody, because I think we do need somebody to live this life. You also touched on something as a little girl, and I totally messed up this first question, but it talks about mental tolls in our
Mm.
culture right now, in the dating culture. What do you feel like the mental toll of the current dating culture has had on both men and women?
Dang, a mental toll. What
Mm.
mental toll has it taken? Um,
On the culture,
on the culture,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I just think that when I think dating, I think of sadly, I think of dating apps,
Mm,
I
yeah.
think of social media.
Mhm,
When you talk about the culture today, that's where my brain immediately goes. And
mhm,
so dating apps, social media, almost like being the opposite of mental of a mentally well, because
mhm.
when you start talking about social media and dating apps, yeah, that's where the your mental health becomes at risk
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
you're swiping left and right, and
Yeah.
people are swiping
Mhm.
left and right on you, and you're in DMs, and people are ghosting you, and
Yeah,
all those things is part of the
absolutely.
culture.
Yeah.
So that takes his mental toll, and you can start to almost feel like, it's you almost start to feel like dating is just too hard,
Mhm, mhm.
or you just feel the rejection of like,
Unlike when you met somebody when you were at the library or at the grocery store, like the stories that you would hear, or meeting somebody at a gathering from a friend of a friend. Like that was so,
Yeah.
easy to do and just organic. And now people are so we're so close, but we're so disconnected.
Exactly. And it's there's such a false sense of people liking you,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
going, Instagram and people giving you all these likes and you start
Hmm.
feeling like, oh, this person loves me. And the truth is it's those things are demonstrated over time. Those things are demonstrated by actions, not by how many times a person, sent you a text emoji. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think there's just this false sense of people caring about you, people loving you. I mean, I'm always shocked to hear that there are people who never met in person. Like
And that's
they
wild
only
to me.
text or they only FaceTime. I'm like, you've never even met this person? Like,
My thing was, if I can't see you within a week after we connect on online, then I can't do it, because I don't know if I'm talking to somebody in Korea or wherever. And
okay,
people are bad people these days. So when you talk
absolutely.
about, like, so with that, I want to get a little deeper. And so we've talked about you talk about accountability a lot. So when you talk about like the role of accountability, what does that play in healing relationships in our community? Or
Okay.
does it, does accountability really play a healing, a place in healing our relationships in the community?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think accountability should play that role.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think it does the way
Mm-mm.
it should, because that is actually why we have like the manosphere, and
Right.
that's why Kevin Samuels blew up.
Right.
All those things is because I've learned that apparently a lot of women don't want to be held accountable,
Yeah.
and maybe so. And I'm sure there's a lot of men that don't want to be held accountable either.
Hmm.
So I think accountability should play a role. Um, I think that I'm learning that, women want to be lied to. They don't really like
They don't really
hearing
want the truth.
the
No,
truth,
no, they don't.
especially from another woman,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Like I think that, you
Do you
know,
think that's the case for women or more so for men? Because I believe they don't want to hear from a man way more than they want to hear from a woman. I think they'll listen to a
yeah,
woman now. If it's five women against one and you're that one, it's almost impossible to kind of, unless they have a lot of respect for you, and they see you as a different person. But even within, if they do have respect for you, they won't really probably be in your circle if they are on, not
mm,
thinking that way.
interesting. So you don't think men like accountability from other men? You don't like?
No, I don't think women would want to hear from men more so than want to hear from women,
Oh,
because it's
interesting.
almost like, the girl code. And I feel like, even I've seen in my job, I've seen with other women, it does not. I've heard them say out loud, "Well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be attacked too." So that's
True.
a thing. That's a real thing.
That's a
So
real thing.
unfortunately, where we used to have women to kind of, well, I think the absence of our grandparents, great grandparents, and those people now coming into that age and not calling those women out is the
Mhm.
problem, because a lot of our women are, they still want to have a good time, and it's nothing wrong with that. I think that's good times just look different for people who are maturing or are seasoned, and unfortunately they still kind of are stuck in that time when they were younger.
Absolutely. It's like arrested development
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think the truth is that, if somebody doesn't want to be held accountable, it doesn't matter who says it, whether it's a man
Mhm.
or a woman,
Okay.
it hurts to
Yes.
hear. And I know when I used to listen to Kevin Samuels, although I found him extremely entertaining, some of the things he
Mhm.
said,
Mhm.
they were true, but they hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when he would talk about like plus size women. I'm like,
Mm.
well, dang, but
Yeah.
it was true.
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
it was true,
Yeah.
but or most of it. So I think that is the reality, is that and I think like as I grow and learn, I'm in therapy now.
Mhm.
The reality is that growth can be painful,
Mhm.
And so for in our community, for us to really take it to the next level, we are going to have to hear some of those uncomfortable truths and sit in that to really get what we want.
Yeah.
And because so
Yeah.
many of us, I mean, I have hundreds of videos out there with a lot of nasty comments by Black women
Mm.
who it's very evident that hearing other perspectives um,
Hmm.
is just not where we're just not at that place where we're ready to be open to the possibility that there's another way to think and another way to do things.
Absolutely. And I always say, well, if there's the thing that you're looking for, let me see the product. Let me see that product. And oftentimes they can't produce that product with the way they're doing it. So that's why I always push back when we had those conversations about that, because oftentimes you're not seeing it. You're not seeing it all in our
You.
community with what some of the things that's going on. What do you think about women who, are in the modern dating area, and what stigmas do you think you feel need to be broken with the modern dating with women?
Got it. And if you see me looking to the side, I actually did take some notes. I'm like,
Nice,
hold on,
nice.
let me make sure I'm hitting all my points
Okay.
here. Um, okay, so stigmas that need to be broken as far as with the modern dating. Man, I mean,
What do you feel about modern dating with women? And what do you want to be broken from that stigma?
yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest things, kind of like we talked about yesterday, is that the
Hmm.
woman is the prize and
Hmm.
solely
Yeah.
the only prize. I think that holds women back because what I see is a lot of women feeling and thinking like they can sit and be cute and
Yeah.
do absolutely nothing
Yeah.
and everything's supposed to fall in place and all they have to do is have the look, and
Yeah.
there's so much invested into that and not enough invested into the personality, the wits, the strategy, the
Yeah.
all the other things that someone who's going to marry you is actually going to really look for,
Hmm.
in addition to looks.
Right.
But I think looks fade. I mean, after like the first date or second date, you're
Absolutely.
like,
Hmm.
okay, cool. I see you look good. Now, what else is there? And
Yeah.
the problem is that a lot of women beyond their,
Hmm.
fake butt or whatever it is, may not have a lot to produce, you
Yeah.
know, and
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 so that shows that's like almost a mirror in front of them. And so even when I was dating, I would ask, yeah, I know you're cute and things of that nature, but I would then go into deeper conversations or deeper questions, because I
Mhm.
was a question asker, and a lot of times people didn't. Now I will say this: the women that did answer the questions and who were confident about who they were, I feel like those were the ones who had done some self reflection and
Yeah.
some self healing. So therefore, they could understand that we're not wasting others' time,
Yeah.
whereas other people would think it's this mystery or is playing games and things of that nature. And so oftentimes they just didn't want to answer, and I knew it wasn't the fact that they couldn't answer, it's just the fact that they didn't know how to answer it, because nobody had asked them those type of questions, maybe even growing up. And it all goes back to your childhood, how you were raised, and what you really think relationships look like. And in our community, a lot of us don't have relationships to kind of like see as models. And
Mhm.
if we've seen other things on TV, which has kind of raised us for the last 15 years, how do we get back to that point? Because I'm still, I'm a middle-aged man now, and I remember the Cosby shows and the different worlds and those shows who that had some level of relationships in them that you wanted to strive for, even if you didn't have that at home. We saw a vision of that on TV and entertainment industry, and now it's all over the place.
Yeah. No, that's so real. That
Yeah.
is so real. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I would think that's to me the biggest stigma is that, and we all know because women know that men are visual, and so we do put a lot of emphasis on that, but forgetting that the qualities that push women forward to marriage are, having some component of looks, but
Right.
also matching that even more so
Hmm.
with personality, because you're
Yeah.
going to have to be able to get along with his family
Yeah.
and being smart, because maybe there's a financial component to
Yeah.
marriage, and yeah,
Mhm.
he doesn't want to be blowing all the money. So those other things, and so I'm not sure how much women focus on those things. I
or
think
even understand it or see what it looks like, because a lot of people don't think like that. I mean, how would you know to answer those things if you didn't see it growing up? And and then we get to this point of, a lot of us have, gone to college, or, gotten some type of post-secondary education. And we forget that education in that space is different than intellect and understanding and being
mm,
intelligent and having,
yeah,
thinking outside of just, merit. To me, and I heard this when I was in my early 20s, marriage is a business. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant because I
mm,
didn't see it, right? So it's not a business in the sense of, I feel like you're just there for business, but you're
yeah,
taking care of business. There are things that come up that deal with business. And if you don't have that within your own life, right,
yes,
then how can you even have that conversation with somebody? Because all we're seeing nowadays is like, is the perception of what people look like, and social media has done us, injustice with that.
yeah. Now you're really preaching, Corey. That is so true.
Yeah.
That is something that, and of course, I've only been married for a year, but the people
That's a
here,
congratulations, though. I mean, a lot of
thank
people can't
you.
say that.
Yeah, indeed. No, that's true. And
Yeah.
it has, I wish I could sit back and say it was the easiest year of my life, but it has not been.
Yeah.
But it's been the most enlightening in
Mm-hmm.
terms of us growing and learning. And the
Mm-hmm.
business
Mm-hmm.
part is the part that I think a lot of people, women especially, don't get. That's a bit, and especially the way men think,
Mm-hmm.
because men don't just get married just to kick back and put
Mm-hmm.
their feet up and be like, yeah, I'm married, I'm good. No,
Right.
like that's
Legacy.
actually where the work really starts
Mhm.
in terms
Yeah.
of how to build wealth, how to all the goals, all the dreams,
Mhm.
and like a man is gonna work to choose a woman who not only looks good, but more importantly, who can help, a helpmate,
Mhm.
somebody
Mhm.
who can help with that vision. And
Yeah.
so if as a woman, you're thinking, oh, I'm trying to get married so I can just, I don't know, have get my nails done, my toes done, and him take care of everything. Cool. Guess what? You are gonna have to be smart and a lot of other things because there's a lot that's gonna need to be managed within
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And if you ever plan to retire, you should be thinking about a lot of different things with regard
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't go on every girl's trip. You can't please everybody.
to you
And
go.
then, again, I've been to enough marriages, and then looked at marriage from from a different lens, because my mother was married, but she did get divorced. But seeing it from that vantage point, and also seeing some friends who I admire, and shout out to my cousin who's like a big brother to me, and we talk all the time. He talks about, marriage as being very selfless. And so,
Indeed.
you can't even get married unless you are thinking that way. If you know how to
That,
compromise, selfless. And then, even when you go to weddings, and you have people symbolize being together with sand, or a candle. You come together, and a lot of people
mm,
I've heard that have a lot of struggles. They're doing things very individual. It's almost like they want to be single in a marriage, and
yes.
we know that doesn't work, or doesn't last for a long period of time if they come in with that mindset. So I feel like, even going back to what we talked about earlier about your past and when you were younger, you
Mm,
the mental health piece definitely plays a huge part in it,
yes.
because you have to do the self-reflection first before you can even think about being with somebody else.
Yeah.
I've had my fair share. Even when I was younger, I knew I was never ready for that,
Mm,
because I had some things and I needed to do first. And I thought it was just financially, but it's also mentally as well. So, and mature. And a lot of
yeah.
people don't think that they have to mature into that space.
Well, Corey, and I think that's one of the reasons why at 40, how old am I? 42, almost
Mhm.
43,
Mhm.
that there's so many times in my life where I was like, oh, I need therapy.
Yeah.
But then I would just get distracted and never follow up.
Mm.
Me being married, again, it's only been a year, but I think this is the first time where I took it serious because I was like,
Right.
no,
Mhm.
if I want my marriage to last, if I want all these things I've been saying I wanted for years, I need to take this serious and I need to do what I need to do the work so that I can be as mentally healthy and stable within the context of marriage, because like you said, when you're by yourself, it's easy
Mhm.
to just
Mhm.
be a little bit more reckless with your
Yeah.
finances, with your mental health or with whatever. But when you have another person who's depending on you to not depending on you like that, but like your partnership. So
Right,
it's just like
right,
if you
right.
go into business with anybody, or
Hmm, hmm.
they expect you to show up, and then when you
Absolutely.
do that, because you, meaning me, have whatever types of issues I'm having,
Right.
then yeah, it's not fair to the other person.
Absolutely.
So,
And
um,
that's definitely accountability even within. And I always talk about, like, I've coached before and I've coached other people, sports, but also coaching in this space. And we think about, like, discipline. Discipline is not about your parents disciplining when you were a kid. Discipline comes within.
mm,
It's about you. When you talked about the food earlier, like, I'm trying to get to a certain goal. I can't do that. So if you are
yeah,
with somebody and you all come together and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, the discipline comes when you're also away from them, because they shouldn't have to hold you accountable all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like,
agreed.
but that's just something I've picked up over the years. Now,
Mhm.
with your girlfriends, I know we've talked about this offline a little bit. Like, uh, what are the women that you have relationships with? What are they saying about relationships in modern men today?
Oh man, that's so funny. Not to expose anybody's business now. um, oh boy. Well, I would say it's not good. Modern the yeah the in terms of most modern men, it's
Hmm,
not good. A lot of it is coming from what's on the dating apps
hmm, hmm,
and things like that. But I think the biggest sentiment would be maybe a sense of laziness
hmm.
from the men, not feeling like the men know how to court,
Yeah.
also many of the men not really, I mean, there's even questionable questions around, are they even going to pay for dates sometimes,
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
um basically almost like this sentiment of sometimes a woman having to kind of carry the
hmm, hmm.
whole thing,
Yeah,
which is why
yeah.
now we're seeing more women getting on one knee and proposing to men.
Mm.
It's happening more and more. And
I don't know if
my
that's
friends would not do that, but
right, right, right. I
I don't know
understand.
any
I've
woman
seen
will
them.
do that. But it is happening.
Hmm.
And so honestly, sometimes I'm just like, whew, I am just glad that I don't have to deal with that. Because,
Right,
and
right.
I don't know what that's about. Like, I don't
Mm.
know. Well, I kind of do know what that's about. So one thing real quick, I live in the, as you know,
Mhm,
DMV.
mhm,
And anytime me and my husband go out,
mhm,
we
mhm.
look around. There are so many
9 to 1.
single Black women. And I
Mhm,
say single because, they don't have rings on their finger,
mhm,
or
mhm.
maybe they have a
Understand.
boyfriend. But,
Right.
obviously they're out by themselves.
Mhm,
They're out in groups. And many of these women are absolutely gorgeous. And it's just like, and many of these women look like they're in their 40s.
mhm,
Whoa. So one, that exposes that there's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of
mhm.
single women. I
It
think men
is.
have a lot of options. Men
Mhm.
are not trying to, I mean, they just have a lot of options.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it makes sometimes it harder for them to, maybe when they run into, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but when they run into issues and challenges with certain women, especially if
Mhm,
you're not, if you're only dating her and she's not your girlfriend or your fiance or your wife,
mhm.
it makes it easier to be like, I'm good. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah,
go over here to, and so I think that's also part of the culture too.
yeah, yeah, that is a challenge. Where do you think we went wrong? Like,
Ooh,
how do you think we got here?
dang, that's a now, Corey. Now you're getting deep.
Do you
How
think there's
did
any
we get here?
possibility for us to get back to the Huxtables, even though Martin, they were shacking up a little bit. They got married eventually, so it wasn't like And we
Mhm.
talked about one of the things I really liked about Kevin Samuels, even though a lot of people didn't like him. He always talked about marriage, and so
He did.
my it always kind of like baffled me, and I'm like, why can't you all hear this? Do you not see the bottom line? He wants people to be married. And
Sure.
so I think the people that you might get on your channel who are criticism or are the people who don't understand, like, having a man and a woman around is so important, even when raising children and people in your community.
I
It
agree.
brings it stronger. And if people really understand, like, the sacredness of a marriage. And I've had those friends who got married and divorced at an earlier age. They thought they were doing the right thing, so I kudos to them. But as you mature, you know better, and a lot of people still
Oh,
act like they don't know better, then that's where we have problems, because then you go into your late 30s, 40s, and you're not dating with intent. And so we all are around here dating each other, and we're really not healed. And I think that's a testimony to even yourself. You could probably look back and say, I might have been ready for this 7, 8 years ago, but because I made a commitment to myself.
mm-hmm.
I made a commitment to myself first. That's how I'm able to be in this place with somebody that can look at me and understand and see where I came from and where I am now. And
Yeah.
thank God I did the work, because if we talk about like being a Christian, or we talking about, we talked about the other day too, and a lot of women, I would hear them say those things about they want a spiritual man or a man of God.
Yeah.
But as a woman and a man, um, you have to have done the work first. And so you're supposed to be working on yourself during these times where you're not with somebody. And a lot of times we aren't. We're just kind of just hanging out, doing our own things, just focusing. I see a lot of women just put their heads down and just kind of go into work, and they're not doing any work on themselves. You're
Yeah.
actually working for somebody else, and you're making them better. You're not
Mm.
making yourself better. So I think that's tough to hear. And a lot of people never come out of that. I have friends, really close friends, who put their heads down, especially when relationships don't go, well, and they'll complain about the same things you're describing. But I
Mhm.
don't think that they're doing the work on themselves, and they have these images in their head of what they think a man is. So, do you believe that we can get back to that place? Or, sometimes I'm it's like I got 15 to 25% of me thinking that, there's hope, but a lot of me is like, you just got to put your head down and focus on yourself, and hopefully we can rewrite this for Black folks.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be hopeful, I really do. And I think that, maybe it's not about getting back to, but
Hmm.
maybe it's recreating something new,
Sure.
because now with technology and
Sure.
AI, and people literally have AI relationships, like
Yeah.
relationships with robots.
Hmm.
So, I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know what it's going to look like in the future, but I think it's us reimagining what it can be. And something you said, you mentioned healing. That's actually one of the things I learned recently. Well, I kind of already intuitively knew this, but it's this idea that we're never really healed, but we're
Hmm.
always on a journey to
Hmm.
healing some part of ourselves.
Hmm.
And it's like, if we as Black women can accept that, figure out what are the parts of yourself that needs to heal, and get
Hmm.
on a journey to healing those things, I think it's possible. The
Yeah.
problem, I think, is a lot of us don't think that there's anything we need to heal. You know,
That is
we don't
the
want to look at it.
yes.
You
You
know,
think that you got it all like that, and even with my colleagues, I hear them like you boost up women's, and it's like they don't even need no man to kind of tell them. They got a whole bunch of cheerleaders right there in front of you. So, when you think about that, in itself, like, how do you feel like we can reintroduce that safety and trust back with the genders for a better
Mm,
relationship space?
yeah, reintroduce the trust. Ooh,
I
that's
mean,
that's
unless we do what we talked about, what you just mentioned, is like, we go back to recreate something that's really nice and beautiful, and then, from that recreation, and then we can, because I think some people that's gonna be left in the dust anyway. You almost gonna have to just teach the next generation, or the
hard.
next generation coming up, that's 10 and under.
Yeah, well, and that's actually a good thing, is like you said, helping the next generation. That's one way. I hate to say this, but for some of us in our, 40s and 50s, it might be too late, just because
Yeah,
many of us are stuck in our ways.
yeah.
But I think when we have the opportunity, like, I have a daughter who's 14, so I have
Okay.
an opportunity to kind of teach her, these were my mistakes, this is what I wish I wouldn't have done.
Hmm.
If I could go back, I would do this differently. If I had if my dad was present, perhaps I would
Hmm.
have learned this. So that's an opportunity, to hope that
Hmm.
she doesn't kind of recreate some of those things. But yeah, that's a great question, Corey. Something to really ponder is like, how do we improve the situation?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's something that we're going to continue to talk about. So, this is something that you can think about. So, what this is my last question for you for this series, but you know, what was some things that you had to work on within yourself to get you to be a wifey?
That's a great question, man. Well, whew, okay, that's a lot. So
Okay.
I'll just say that most of my life, I'll admit that
Hmm.
I tried to date men that reminded me of my dad.
Mm. Which is
And
fair. Most people do, I think.
yeah, and I say that that's what most women
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
or most people, even
People
men,
do.
try to do
Men
that
do
with
it too.
women.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I realized that it wasn't a healthy way to date
Hmm.
because then it caused me to kind of just choose people who or like be with men who
Hmm.
just had that very superficial quality of like
Yeah.
reminding me of my dad as opposed
Hmm.
to having those deeper things that I really needed, like
Hmm.
being loyal, being trustworthy,
Right. Right.
being
Right.
honest, whatever. So once I came to terms with that, the fact that I was kind of repeating that cycle over and
Hmm.
over, one day I was like, I just want to date someone who actually doesn't like the polar op, like just
Hmm.
someone who's different, someone who, and actually I had a cousin, and he doesn't watch. I don't think he watched my YouTube channel, but
Right.
he told me once that he was like, Naka, you're gonna just keep recreating the same situation, and your next
Mm.
guy, he's gonna be African, he's
Mm.
gonna be keen, he's gonna be like he was just naming all the things, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And just hearing him say that he was right,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because that was just my superficial, oh, he's African, because my dad was Nigerian.
Right. Right.
And like
Right.
I said, last time I saw my dad, I was 12. My dad passed
Hmm.
when I was 15, but the last time I saw him, I was 12.
Hmm.
So there was this very much like longing for and like, oh, I just really want. So when I kind of realized, like, okay, let me stop doing that. Let me just choose a man or, be with a man because of the things that really matter.
Hmm.
Everything changed. And it was like, oh, I'm engaged. Okay, now I'm married. So I wish I could have figured that out sooner.
Hmm.
But and I think that happens to a lot of us, a lot of women. There's something that maybe you missed in your childhood and you spend years trying to get that,
Hmm.
whatever it is, and then it causes you to have relationships with people that are not healthy.
So I know I was going to ask that. That was going to be my last question, but
Mhm.
you said something that I wanted to like kind of a spark. What was your aha moment? And with that aha moment, what would you tell your 25-year-old self about that aha moment? So those 25-year-olds may need to hear that.
Wow, good questions. Man, what I would tell my 25-year old self would be, hmm, I used to, because my 25-year old self, the funny thing is, I wanted to be married and I wanted to have kids at 25. And I would probably heal. I would have really gotten a therapist and went on a healing journey,
Hmm.
much sooner. And so my 25-year-old self I would just say, heal start healing yourself now
Hmm.
so that you
Hmm.
can get what you really, really want. I didn't at that time at 25, of course, I thought I was healed like every 25
Yeah,
year old thinks
yeah.
that they know everything.
What would be those first steps you would take for healing?
Okay, the first steps. Wow. Uh Now that I'm actually in therapy,
Hmm.
100%, I'm like a huge therapy advocate now. So I
Hmm.
would that would yeah, I would, figure out how to talk to someone,
Hmm.
get some therapy. That would be a step. Um I'll be honest, that's probably going to be the best step
Yeah.
because sometimes you need somebody to kind of mirror back to you or repeat back to you. Somebody who's neutral and,
Right.
not
How
like
was that?
a
How was
friend.
that different? Because we talked about this offline, and again, I promise it's the last thing I ask.
No, you're
But
good.
how was that different from somebody who goes to church often?
Oh, now
Because
that's
we know that therapy is important. We know that you and I do,
mhm,
and I know we've talked offline about um, having a faith base. But for those people who have never even tried that space,
mhm,
I've even heard my pastor talk about. That's why I've pushed into a little bit more, because I heard pastors talking about it more over the last couple of years. So, but
mhm.
for I'm 25 and as a female that really wants to get herself together or get married, and you think that you got the job, you got the career, you're out here doing it by yourself, and you feel like you got it all handed to yourself. What would be that thing you would just go and just how am I teetering between the two? As a
Mm. Okay, so what would be the thing that I would
yeah,
do at 25?
yeah. Because I think a lot of times when we have this, just go to church, just pray. Like God's going to hand it over to you, and we know that's true, but we also know that there are resources out there that you can get
Yeah,
help with simultaneously.
absolutely.
Because oftentimes when we go to church, who people who are, might be a mentor, might be somebody that's related to you, that's going to tell you and boost you up. But like
Mhm,
you said, I think the I don't know you
mhm.
objective at a therapist office virtually and having these conversations, they can pull different things from you that
And
somebody in church who may not know you that well or thinks that they know you, you're able to really, give them the real. So
and there's the judgmental part about the church
absolutely.
thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because then they're going to be judged. Whatever you say, they're going to be judging like low key.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I definitely think that I hear what you're saying. Absolutely, and the 25-year-old me would have been like, "Oh, I'm just going to go to church more,"
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. But now, and granted, there's a financial component too, because not
Yeah.
everybody can afford therapy, depending on your insurance.
Mm-hmm,
Obviously,
mm-hmm.
I'm old, at 25, could I have paid for all the deductible, whatever?
Yeah.
But um, also vetting, I just want to say this, vetting the therapist, making sure it's
Yes.
the right one,
Yes.
and that can be tricky,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what your needs are. If men trigger you or white people
Yes.
trigger you, well, don't
Mm-hmm.
use a white male therapist.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But definitely that third party, that objective person is so important because
Right.
they don't know you and they can objectively respond back to the things you're saying and point
Yeah.
out things and patterns that they're hearing
Right.
that can help propel you forward. But you also have to be ready for it. So would I have been ready at 25? I'm not sure. That's the crazy thing. I don't know if I would be ready to be as introspective as I am now at 42.
But
But
but but but then too, you said you wanted to have a family, but maybe if
it,
you're telling your 25-year-old self now and you're not getting that product, if there's somebody was to give you some advice, because I even think about like at the gym, like you may have paid $50 for the gym a month. You even think about that as well as one of your add-ons to your bill and go every 2 weeks if you
oh
can't
my
go
God,
once a week.
you're right. Oh yeah, I'd easily pay $10 for some coffee. So
Yeah.
yeah, I could. So yes, I hear
Mhm.
what you're saying.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And it's so worth it. So I would definitely tell my 25-year-old self to try the therapy route, learn about yourself, heal yourself
Yeah.
so that you can get what you really want at 25 and not at 40, which
Right.
is it was 38 when I met my husband, but
Yeah.
I got married at 40. I got married at 41.
Mhm.
So yeah, I could have imagine
Right.
25 was when I
Mhm.
wanted it to happen. It happened at 41.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think a lot of that had to do with me being unhealed and
Right.
me not even thinking I had really a whole lot to heal.
Right.
So, yeah.
Understood.